Yamuna Tira Avanuja Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Rayana Namaskritya Shvanaratamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasa Jirayet Nashta Prayeshva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhavati Nashtaki. Oh, Krishna. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, chapter 87, verse 22. And before we get into the prayers, before we get to the verse, we're just going to give a short overview on what's happening in the chapter. And yes.
Okay, so King Parikshit is speaking to Srila Sukadeva Goswami. He's asking him a question. So I want to say something about
that. All right. Does anyone know who King Parikshit is? Raise your hand. All right. Who wants to tell us about his life story and how did he end up with Shukadeva Goswami?
Very briefly, like 2 sentences.
Christina?
Okay, so King Parikshit was king of the world, and he comes from the Yadu lineage. And he was like this young, very powerful king, but then through a series of unfortunate events, he was cursed to die in 7 days by a Brahmana's kid. And so he abandoned all of his kingdom, went to sit on the bank of the river Ganga, and was asking these wise people what he should do with the last 7 days of his life. And fortunately, Sukadeva Goswami came and said, all right, the thing that you should do is listen to me, tell the Srimad Bhagavatam to you, and then that'll be the perfection of your life. And so that's Maharaj Parikshit's story.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Change it up a little bit. Okay, so chapter 87 of the Bhagavatam, it starts with a question, right? Most of these chapters, they start with a question. So King Parikshit is asking Srila Sukadeva Goswami, how can that which is material, how can something that which is material, how can it describe the supreme absolute truth? So how can something that is material describe something that is transcendental? That's what he's asking. That's strange, right? Because now Srila Sukadeva Goswami is telling him about the Bhagavatam, he's talking about the Vedas. So is he implying that the Vedas are material?
I haven't read the chapter, but how I would interpret this question is that since language is material, we know we're in these material bodies, we're using our voices and our material minds and that kind of thing. And you know, by extension, writing books down, that's also material. And then we can't, and like when we speak philosophy, we can't, we often use like analogies, and we often use words that refer to material things in order to try to understand the absolute truth. So, so the question would kind of be like, well, how can we use these material tools in order to understand something that is not material?
Exactly. Christina's too smart. We can't do these questions. So that's the point. We are material. We have material thoughts, material sound vibrations, material language. So when we try to understand the Vedas, we're trying to understand it from a material point of view. So how is it that we can actually understand the supreme absolute truth? Okay, so we're gonna have people read, that's okay. Yeah, we're gonna start with text one, actually. The verses, yeah. Just a translation. Yeah, just a translation. So just to get a little overview of the chapter. If some people could.
Sri Parikshit said, "O Brahman, how can the Vedas directly describe the supreme absolute truth, who cannot be described in words? The Vedas are limited to describing the qualities of material nature, but the supreme is devoid of these qualities, being transcendental to all material manifestations and their causes."
Sukadeva Goswami said, "The Supreme Lord manifested the material intelligence, senses, mind, and vital air of the living entities so that they could indulge their desires for sense gratification, take repeated births to engage in fruitive activities, become elevated in future lives, and ultimately attain liberation."
Those who came before, even our ancient predecessors, meditated upon the same confidential knowledge of the absolute truth. Indeed, anyone who faithfully concentrates on this knowledge will become free from material attachments and attain the final goal of life.
Can we just pause there? So you can see there that they say, those who came before, even our ancient predecessors, meditated upon the same confidential knowledge. So King Parikshit is asking Srila Sukadeva Goswami this question. And then in response, Srila Sukadeva Goswami is relaying a conversation between Lord Narayan and Narada Muni, where Narada Muni also asked this question to Lord Narayan. And in answer to Lord Narayan, to Narada Muni, Lord Narayan then speaks about this ancient discussion that sages had, again, pondering this question.
In this connection, I will relate to you a narration concerning the Supreme Lord Narayan. It is about a conversation that once occurred between Sri Narayan Rishi and Narada Muni. Once while traveling among the various planets of the universe, the Lord's beloved devotee Narada went to visit the primeval sage Narayana at his ashram.
From the very beginning of Brahma's day, Lord Narayan Rishi has been undergoing austere penances in this land of Bharat, while perfectly performing religious duties and exemplifying spiritual knowledge and self-control, all for the benefit of human beings in both this world and the next.
There, Narada approached Lord Narayan Rishi, who was sitting amidst the sages of the village of Kalpa. After bowing down to the Lord of Kurus, Narada asked him the very same question you have asked me.
As the sages listened, Lord Narayan Rishi related to Narada an ancient discussion about the absolute truths that took place among the residents of Jamaloka.
The personality of God had said, "O son of self-born Brahma, once, long ago on Janaloka, wise sages who resided there performed a great sacrifice to the absolute truth by vibrating transcendental sounds. These sages, mental sons of Brahma, were all perfect celibates."
At the time you happened to be visiting the Lord on whatever. Svetaviv, the Supreme Lord in whom the Vedas lie down to rest during the period of universal annihilation. A lively discussion arose among the sages of Jokula as the nature of the supreme absolute truth indeed. The same question arose that you are asking me now.
Although these sages were all equally qualified in terms of Vedic study and austerity, and although they all saw friends, enemies, and neutral parties equally, they chose one of their number to be the speaker, and the rest became eager listeners.
Oh, can we just pause there quickly? So here we see that the sages are now, they asked this question, it also came up, and they just chose one of them, just one among themselves, and then they all just kind of took the position of listener, and they all started listening to this one sage, Sri Sanatana. And it's funny because any one of them could have spoken on it, but then they chose one and they decided, okay, we're gonna take this position of listener, despite the fact that they're all on equal standing and they all are able to speak on this knowledge.
Tulasyananda replied, after the Supreme Lord withdrew the universe he had previously created, he lay for some time as if asleep, and all his energies rested dormant within him. When the time came for the next creation, the personified Vedas awakened him by chanting his glories, just as the poets serving a king approach him at dawn and awaken him by reciting his heroic deeds.
Shruti said, victory, victory to you, O unconquerable one. By your very nature, you are perfectly fully in all opulence. Therefore, please defeat the eternal power of illusion, who assumes control over the modes of nature to create difficulties for conditioned souls. O you who awaken all energies of the moving and non-moving embodied beings. Sometimes the Vedas can recognize you as you sport with your material and spiritual potencies.
This perceivable world is identified with the Supreme because the Supreme Brahman is the ultimate foundation of all existence, remaining unchanged as all created things are generated from it and at last dissolved into it. Just as clay remains unchanged by the products made from it and again merged with it. Thus, it is toward you alone that the Vedic sages direct all their thoughts, words, and acts. After all, how can the footsteps of men fail to touch the earth on which they live?
For a master of the three worlds, the wise get rid of all misery by diving deep into the nectarian ocean of topics about you, which washes away all the contamination of the universe. And what to speak of those who, having by spiritual strength rid their minds of bad habits and free themselves from time, are able to worship your true nature, O Supreme One, finding within it uninterrupted bliss?
Bliss. Only if they become your faithful followers, those who breathe actually alive. Otherwise, the breathing is like that of a bellows. It is by your mercy alone that the elements, beginning with the Mahat Tattva and false ego, created the egg of this universe. Among the manifestations known as Annamaya and so forth, you are the ultimate one, entering within the material coverings along with the living entity and assuming the same forms as those he takes. Distinct from the gross and subtle material manifestations, you are the reality underlying them all.
The followers of the methods set forth by great sages, those with less refined vision worship the Supreme as present in the region of the abdomen, while the Arunis worship him as present in the heart, in the subtle center from which all the pranic channels emanate. From there, O unlimited Lord, these worshippers raise their consciousness upward, the top of the head, where they can perceive you directly. Then, passing through the top of the head toward the supreme destination, they reach that place from which they will never again fall to this world, into the mouth of death.
Apparently entering among the variegated species of living beings you have created, you inspire them to act, manifesting yourself according to their higher and lower positions, just as fire manifests differently according to the shape of what it burns. Therefore, those of spotless intelligence who are altogether free from material attachments realize your undifferentiated, unchanging self to be the permanent reality among all these impermanent life forms.
Just two more.
The individual living entity, while inhabiting material bodies he has created for himself by his karma, actually remains uncovered by either gross or subtle matter. This is so because, as the Vedas describe, he is part and parcel of you, possessor of all potencies. Having determined this to be the status of the living entity, learned sages become imbued with faith and worship, merely speaking, to which all Vedic sacrifices in this world are offered, which are the source of liberation.
My lord, some fortunate souls have gotten relief from the fatigue of material life by diving into the vast nectar ocean of your pastimes, which you enact when you manifest your personal forms to propagate the unfathomable science of the self. These rare souls, indifferent even to liberation, renounce the happiness of home and family because of their association with devotees who are like flocks of swans enjoying the lotus of your feet.
Thank you. Okay, so before we look at the verse 22, the rest of the chapter is Sri Sanatana reciting these prayers. So that's what happens in the rest of the chapter. And then I'm trying to remember all the people that asked this question. I believe Narada Muni goes to his does he go to his spiritual master to relay what he heard from Lord Narayan? His disciple. Okay, so he went to go see his disciple, and then he relayed everything that he heard from Lord Narayan about this meeting among the sages. Okay, let's take a look at the verse.
All right, does anybody want to volunteer to chant the Sanskrit? It's a bit unusual meter.
Udanupatham kulayam idamatma suhrit priyavach. Tarati tatvan mukhitvayi titriyatmani cha. Navata ramanti avasad upasanayatma ano. Yadanushaya ramanti urubhai kusharira vrita.
Else?
Let's do the word for word together. What? You.
Killing. Yeah, and reach wonderful man.
We can read the translation together. When
This human body is used for your devotional service and as forms of friend and love. May you always show mercy to the conditioned souls and affection. Spiritual suicide for which pain living. They continue to offer.
So just a little summary of the verse, it's basically stressing the importance of this human birth, this human body that we have taken, and how we should really utilize it and use it properly in service to the Lord. It's so tough to get this human body, right? There are 8.4 million species. We can get any one of those, and we've been blessed with this human body. So this verse is just emphasizing just how important it is that we have this body and that we use it in service to the Lord. Can I have someone read the first paragraph, please, of the purport?
The Vedas have strong words for those who choose to remain in illusion rather than serve the all-merciful personality of Godhead. The Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad states, Adamam Mashya Pashyanti, Natam Pashyati Kaschana, Natam Vidhata Ya Ima, Jaja Nanyad Yusmakam, Antaram Bharuvaha, Niharena Pravrita Jalpya Chashu Tripa Ukta Shashas Charanti. Everyone can see the place where the Lord manifested himself in this world for his own pleasure, but still no one sees him. None of you know him who generated all these living beings, and thus there's a great difference between your vision and his. Covered by the fog of illusion, you performers of Vedic rituals indulge in useless talk and live only to gratify your senses.
Thank you. So it's saying here that we live on this material platform. We only want to gratify our own senses. And because we are in this material ideology of the world, we cannot perceive something transcendental. So we cannot see the Lord, we cannot understand the Lord because we are using our material senses to satisfy our own senses, right? And in order to better understand the Lord, to develop a taste for him, is to perform bhakti. We need to take up this practice of bhakti. Okay, can someone read the second paragraph? Robert?
The Supreme Lord pervades this universe, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita 9:4, Maya tatam idam sarvam jagat. Nothing in this world, not even the most insignificant clay pot or shred of cloth, is devoid of the presence of the personality of Godhead. But because he keeps himself invisible to envious eyes, ayakta mirtina, materialists are misled by his material energy and think that the source of material creation is a combination of atoms and physical forces.
So, in the previous paragraph, it was said that everyone can see the place where the Lord manifested himself in this world for his own pleasure, but still no one sees him. And in this paragraph, it said that nothing in this world, not even the most insignificant clay pot or shred of cloth, is devoid of the presence of the personality of Godhead. But again, it says, because he keeps himself invisible to envious eyes, materialists are misled by his material energy and think that the source of material creation is a combination of atoms and physical forces. Have you ever heard of the statement, seeing is believing. Okay, what do you think about that? Do you think that seeing is believing? Is believing is seeing, Anthony?
Hare Krishna. When they do crime reports and they take eyewitness, eyewitness accounts of what happened, there could be two people standing right next to the crime and they both have different versions of what's going on. So you see kind of what you want to see or what you choose to see based on your perspective and experience.
Yeah, so basically everyone has their own truth. And we wanted to show you this video. Can you pull it up, please? Where you'll have to count. Some of you may have seen the video, and if you have, please don't have other people count. So you'll have to count how many passes the team in white makes. Okay, count very attentively. All right.
The answer is
Wait,
How
who can tell
many-
me how many passes?
13.
Okay, okay. And did anyone see a bear? Let's see the video one more time. Just.
the answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So yeah, it's easy to miss something you're not looking for. And even if you spotted the bear, it must be because either you've seen the video or you're really attentive and intelligent. But the point is to prove that you can miss some completely obvious things when you hyper-focus on something else. So we cannot always believe what we see because we rarely see everything that's happening, even when our eyes are wide open. So, and not to even speak about things that are not accessible to the human eye, our perception is very limited. So, similarly to what I was saying, when we focus on one particular thing, we may not notice many other things that are clearly happening right in front of us. So, when we are very focused on the material platform and satisfying our own senses, it makes us kind of blind, and we only see the things that will bring the enjoyment to us. And we don't want to see the sufferings of other living beings. We think, oh, I'm gonna live forever, or like, you know, we only live once, so might as well do that crazy thing. And many people don't want to believe in God because then they will have to give up certain things that bring them pleasure. And this is called willful blindness. Like, I don't want to acknowledge that there's things that will mess up my ability to blindly enjoy, so I'll just choose to not believe in them. Like, I don't want to believe that there's karma because then I'll have to treat people nicely or stop eating meat. In this way, people give up a really rare opportunity for self-investment, for spiritual advancement, in exchange for material enjoyment that literally lasts a moment, like in the sense of eternity. It's just a little fragment of our existence. It's just a little moments that we exchange for spiritual advancement. So we don't choose the spiritual advancement, but we choose this enjoyment. So this is what spiritual suicide is, as it says in the translation. And can anyone think of other ways to commit spiritual suicide, like some practical ways that we may, not practical ways to commit spiritual suicide, but something that some of us do maybe every day? At least I do that every day. But what can you notice in your life that may be a way of spiritual suicide? Yes, Prabhu?
I can think of one that's not, I hope not a common one in terms of persons, but I remember when I first came to the temple here, I had a friend of mine come from college. And I remember he asked, Dhanapati Swami was giving a class, I remember it so well. He said, can you look at me and say that I'm not God? So he was going to some place or something, and I guess he had come with some idea that he was God. Ganapati Swami said, yes, I can look at you and say you're not God. And he didn't know what to say after that. But the idea that because I'm a spiritual entity, then to make the wrong assumption, I'm the supreme spiritual entity. So that's a form of spiritual suicide.
Yeah. Even chanting not attentively is a form of spiritual suicide. Like Krishna is there, he's writing the holy name, we just ignore him. So, gotta chant attentively. Yes, Nita?
I just remember another verse in which this term is mentioned, like spiritual suicide. So this is at the beginning of the 10th canto, right before Shukadeva Goswami starts narrating the pastimes of Krishna. So he says that glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is performed in the Parampara system. Such glorification is relished by those no longer interested in false temporary glorification of this cosmic manifestation. Descriptions of the Lord are right medicine for the conditioned soul undergoing repeated birth and death. Therefore, who will cease hearing such glorification of the Lord except a butcher or one who is killing his own self? So the idea here is that there's hearing the pastimes of the Supreme Lord liberates you from the bondage of like birth and death. So who will be disinterested in this apart from one who is interested in being stuck here? Or like that means that he is trying to negate his eternal life by just trying to be here in the world of birth and death. So he is like committing spiritual suicide.
Christina?
I would say that not recognizing where you're at in the process and not accepting yourself is a form of spiritual suicide. Because if you, for example, decide like, oh, I'm gonna chant, 32 rounds a day, and I'm only going to like eat ghee and rice or something, and take cold showers and like sleep 2 hours a night because like that's what spiritual people do. You're gonna, unless you're actually at the platform where that's like enjoyable to you, like that's what you want to do, then you're gonna burn out really quickly, and then you're gonna just kind of fall away from the process and decide that spirituality isn't for you. That like, oh, well, because I need to sleep more than 2 hours a night, I guess I'm not a spiritual person. And then you just stop your progress. So I think it's really important to understand, what your nature is and where you're at, and kind of what's appropriate for you, and not try to like jump to a more renounced level, even though it seems like that's what spiritual people do.
If you commit offenses to the devotees, then all these other things will come.
Anthony?
Thinking you have more time, like, well, I could chant my rounds tomorrow. I don't need to do it today. I worked hard. I deserve time to watch cartoons or anything. But thinking that you have more time to do hard work and delaying it. When you could be doing it right now. And then to touch on her point, at your level that you're at. There's always a certain amount of work to be done. But then you need to rest too. So understanding yourself, so pigtail off her points too.
So having the balance and gradually coming to the platform that the exalted devotees are on. We cannot just jump over from where we are at to like the point where more advanced devotees are. We have to take little steps that will steadily bring us to that point. Thank you. And we can go to the third paragraph.
Radhika, do you want to read that one?
Displaying their compassion for such foolish materialists, the personified Vedas advise them in this prayer to remember the real purpose for which they exist, to serve the Lord, their greatest well-wisher, with loving devotion. The human body is the ideal facility for reviving one's spiritual consciousness. Its organs, ears, tongue, eyes, and so on, are quite suitable for hearing about the Lord, chanting his glories, worshiping him, and performing all the other essential aspects of devotional service.
Okay, so this chapter is again just emphasizing how blessed we are to have this human body and how we should utilize it in the service of the Lord. And it mentioned hearing about the Lord. So hearing about the Lord, it's very, very important, right? Can anyone think of an example in the Bhagavatam where hearing about the Lord was really core example in like the pastime? Lord Maharaj, want to elaborate?
I have a limited reference point of Bhagavatam, so that's what came to mind from specifically him hearing about the Lord through the womb when his mother was being taught, and because of that association, it ensued the entire plot line of that Asta.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much, yes. Yeah, no.
Heard about Krishna and she developed that attachment. I think that's a classical example.
Yeah. I'm telling you that quite recent we read about Rukmini and Krishna, and Rukmini had just heard about Krishna. She'd never met him, and then she decided, I'm going to marry Krishna. So that's the power of hearing about the glories of Krishna.
Another example in 10th canto, the wives of the Brahmanas, they supposedly never had seen Krishna, but while it's described while trading different things with the people of Vrindavan, they would hear about him, and just by hearing about him, they got so attracted to him, they compose wonderful prayers when they actually see Krishna. It'd be surprising that someone who's not seen someone else, how could they know him so deeply just by hearing?
Yeah. So the living entity, the living entity is really intelligent, right? Why wouldn't the living entity be intelligent? Krishna created the living entities, so he wouldn't create them as these dumb things. Creates them in his own image. So we're very intelligent. All living entities are very intelligent. And then just on top, there's the human body. So we need to use our intelligence to hear about the Lord, glorify the Lord, chant his names. And in this way, we can purify ourselves, purify our senses so that we can serve him. Can we go to the next paragraph? Yeah.
One's material body is destined to remain intact for only a short time, and so it is called kulayam, subject to dissolving into the earth, ko liyate. Nonetheless, if properly utilized, it can be one's best friend. When one is immersed in material consciousness, however, the body becomes a false friend, distracting the bewildered living entity from his true self-interest. Persons too much infatuated with their own bodies and those of their spouses, children, pets, and so on are in fact misdirecting the devotion to the worship of the illusion, asadupasana. In this way, as the Shrutis state here, such people commit spiritual suicide, ensuring future punishment for failing to carry out the high responsibilities of human existence. Should I read that verse? As this Ishopanishad verse 3 declares, Asurya namate loka andhena tamasa vrita tamse pratyavi gachanti yeke chatma hanojana. The killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance.
So this is just emphasizing the fleeting nature of the material body. We only have limited time to use our body to worship Krishna, glorify Krishna, and purify ourselves so that we can become liberated, right? Because if we don't, then we're just treating ourselves like a false friend, right?
Yeah. And having a false friend is not something we want to have. I'm sure many of us had an experience of a false friend. Raise your hand if you didn't. All right. And it's a pretty toxic and abusive relationship. Like sometimes you have your best interest in the person, but the person just wants to have some sort of profit from that relationship. So they just keep treating you in the way that you do not deserve. It's not it's not very fair to you. And sometimes it might be really hard to come out of that kind of relationship. Sometimes you feel like, oh, what if I lose that only friend that I have, and then I'll just be lonely. But sometimes we just need to separate ourselves from the friend that has that mentality of hurting us and not wishing the best for us. So why would we want to be that kind of friend to ourselves? That's a question to think about.
Yeah, basically, if someone mistreats you, you wouldn't put up with it, right? You're in this stage of your life where you know your worth and you're like, I don't need this toxic type of things around me. So if you won't put up with it from other people, why would you put up with it from yourself? Why would you treat yourself as a false friend? Why wouldn't you take care of yourself? Okay, last one.
Yeah.
Those who are overly attached to sense gratification, or who worship the impermanent in the form of false materialistic scriptures and philosophies, maintain desires that carry them into more degrading bodies in each successive life. Since they are entrapped in the perpetually rotating cycle of samsara, their only hope for salvation is getting a chance to hear the merciful instructions spoken by the Supreme Lord's devotees.
You can finish it off.
Srila Sridhara Swami prays. I'm not going to be able to say this. When will I receive a human birth in which my mind may take pleasure in you, who are the heart of the Supreme Soul and Lord of the universe?
Okay. So this paragraph is stressing the importance of the human body. I mean, how sweet is that? Srila Sridhara Swami is praying, when will I receive a human birth in which my mind may take pleasure in you, who are the Supreme Soul and Lord of the universe? Even demigods and sages, they all want human bodies because They want to be able to worship Krishna. They want to be able to become liberated and eternally and spend eternity with Krishna. So this is just showing us that the human body is really important, and we're so lucky that we got it. This is because of past pious experiences, you know, that we're in this human body, or else we'd be like one of the cats that are just giving us all fleas. So we should really utilize our human experience and our human intelligence to serve Krishna. Do you have any final thoughts?
Anyone have any final thoughts or comments, questions?
Nicolas?
Scroll down, please. It's more. So pretty much there was a piece where he said, maybe it's like paragraph 2, but he said that the Lord, that he comes down to experience himself. Is that who we are? Is it that we're that piece of the Lord who comes to experience himself, and then we just try to just please our own self?
Is that who we are?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the exact.
Control after experience.
Yeah.
I know what he's talking about.
Okay.
Okay, but the Lord comes down in to experience.
Yeah, here we go. So the Lord manifested himself in this world for his own pleasure, but still no one sees it. So is our presence his manifestation for his own pleasure?
Everything that is in existence is his manifestation. So, yes.
We're also intended for pleasing the Lord. That's what it is. But when we're not engaged in that, then we're not serving our nature.
So, and a quick question. So I know that we're not supposed to identify as God, but also there was a piece that says that the you is to like. Yeah, I talked about the true self, and let's see. You are your true self.
He's talking to God, right?
Yeah,
It's not talking to people.
Okay.
well, he's saying although Krishna is people's true self. But
Yeah.
they're part of us.
Because we are partners,
Okay, thank you.
but we are not Krishna. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Anthony?
Like an anecdote to that, like he gave us this vessel to pilot and he's the co-pilot and he's like, it's cool over there, but you can drive anywhere you want. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go over here. And he's like, oh, whatever. So you're in it with him. He's just letting you experience it next to him.
That's a really nice analogy. Yeah, that's true. So he's giving us the willpower, the free willpower to make our own decisions, but he's with us along for the ride, and he's like trying to nudge us in the right direction, but we have our freedom of choice.
Yeah, to add to the point of next question, I found this allegory that Srila Prabhupada makes in Krishna book in chapter 87. So he says, it is stated that the living entities themselves were, sorry. Another point clearly stated in the answer of Shukadeva Goswami is that it is the mind, senses, intelligence of the individual living entity that the Lord created. It is not stated that the living entities themselves were ever created. Just as the shining particles of the sun's rays always exist with the sun, the living entities exist eternally as parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of God. But just as the sun rays are sometimes covered by a cloud, which is created by the sun. So the conditioned souls, although externally existing as parts of the Supreme Lord, are sometimes put within the cloud of the material concept of life in the darkness of ignorance. The whole Vedic process is to alleviate the darkened condition. Ultimately, when the senses and mind of the conditioned being are fully purified, he comes to his original position called Krishna consciousness, and that is liberation. So we're parts and parcels of Krishna, and therefore our eternal nature and original position is Krishna consciousness. So it's not necessarily being Krishna, the Supreme Lord, but being conscious Krishna and being Krishna conscious. All right. Oh, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Shiva Prabhupada ki.